Fleet Admiral Yrrol watched with horrifying hopelessness as his homeworld started to break into a million pieces. Confusion, shock, awe and fear cycled across his face while the rest of his crew just stared at him. No. It couldn't be real. There was nothing to indicate that the Khajuk would resort to the extermination of the human race to try and win the war. Nothing at all. Worried whispers slowly began to pierce the silence that had paralyzed the bridge on the UFF Kapalaski. Out of the corner of his teary eyes, he noticed First Officer Reytey get up from his chair and tenderly move his large, intimidating, ape-like frame towards him. With the initial shock gone, all Yrrol could focus on was his family. His wife and children, gone or dead, like most of Earth. No. There's no guarantee that they're dead. The evacuation boats still have time to mount a rescue. I mustn't think like this. He barely registered the huge but gentle arms of the first officer guide him out to the bridge and towards his cabin. He barely paid attention to the condolences and soothing words uttered by everyone he was chaperoned past. He barely even noticed the tears streaming down his cheeks and sobs wrecking his once proud figure. No. The only thing on Fleet Admiral Yrrol's mind was his family. The next 3 days would have passed in pure chaos if it wasn't for Reytey. Yrrol refused to leave his room, and no one had any idea what to do. The ship's chief medical officer routinely visited to try and get the Admiral to talk, but failed every time. Reytey had done his best to try and spend as much free time to sit silently with Yrrol, while the latter scoured any media related to survivors of the Soul tragedy. He wanted to be there for his friend, who was struggling with the potential loss of his loved ones. After all, who better in the galaxy to understand family than a Rufus? The 4th day, however. Well, the 4th day was when Reytey watched his friend die. The communications officer had run in and woken him, saying that she had a small chip containing a message from Yrrol's wife, Ada. It was sent by the sister ship in orbit helping with the evacuation efforts, the UFF Rendezvous. Reytey was ecstatic. A message from Ada meant that she was alive, and it also possibly meant that the twins were okay too. Before the CO could continue, he grabbed the chip out of her hand and immediately left for the Admiral's quarters. Faithfully, he delivered the chip to his friend, and was about to leave and wait outside before he heard him say, "Reytey, please stay." These were the first words spoken by the Admiral in almost 4 days. He went back into the room, fur bristling with happiness, and watched as the Admiral inserted the chip into his computer and booted up the video. The first thing he noticed was the high-pitched wail dominating the audio from the speakers. The second thing he noticed was the tears running down Ada's cheeks. This was all wrong. Why was the lighting red? Why was the air frosting whenever she spoke? And why were the alarms and her the only things making noise? He saw her try to speak and break down at least 5 times before she went silent. The quiet minutes dragged on and on before she had composed herself enough to speak. "If you're seeing this, Rin, I'm dead." Reytey's fur slammed flat against his skin. "The evacuation shuttle's been hit by some kind of debris from the crackling." Her eyes began to water again. "They're all dead, Rin. The impact got both the pilots and with venting atmosphere. The rest of the survivors, I watched them slowly give in to the cold. The cold, Rin. It's so fucking cold." Reytey was now certain that the thing floating in the background was a frozen human corpse. "I'm so fucking scared, Rin. And I'm so fucking tired of everything." She was speaking through sobs at this point. He had never seen an individual of any species express this many emotions at once, and still managed to communicate in a semi-effective manner. "Sammy and Al, I couldn't do anything. We were running to the shelters and suddenly the ground just disappeared. And they fell and I just couldn't do anything. They just fell and I couldn't..." The computer being smashed against the wall snapped Reytey back to reality. What the fuck? He was now fully aware that Yrrol was screaming and saw the chair hurtle towards the cabinet, impacting and dent the metal frame before breaking into its constituent pieces. "That's nearly half your body weight. How the hell..." Before he could finish that thought, Yrrol turned towards him. Those eyes. The 4 gods above those eyes. What kind of insane monster has replaced my friend? "Leave me." ReyTey physically cringed. Are you sure? I said get out! The huge, bulky gorilla dog thing was all too happy to sprint away from the human. Rinaldo watched silently as the coffin was lowered into the airlock and subsequently jettisoned towards the sun. Those fucking bugs are going to pay. Behind him to the left stood the former vice, now acting president of the United Earth Government, Abdul Sina, and behind him to the right stood the tall, thin form of the Federation's Special Envoy for Human Affairs, Zalato Bali. Those fucking bugs are going to pay. They stayed there for a long time, watching the casket shrink down to nothingness through the dark-tinted windows. Those fucking bugs are going to pay. He turned and addressed the two figures beside him. We need to talk. Are you sure that's a good idea? You have just lost your nestmate. The cold fury in the human's eyes made the Sathorian wanted to do anything but talk with them right now. Abdul and I have something we need to discuss with you. After spending a few seconds channeling her inner focus to remind herself she had nothing to fear from her allies, she spoke. As you wish. Ambassador Zalacto dipped her head as a sign of respect and followed the two humans to an empty officers' mess aboard the Kavaletsky. Once they were all seated, Abdul began to speak. We would like to leave the Federation.